Good evening, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well. My name is Pooja, and this evening we are going to be talking about adaptability, a key in challenging times. And we have Linda from Canada who's going to be talking to us about adaptability. And let me add her and we can start.
Yeah. So it was, I felt like I belonged to the new place. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that helps. I really do think that the quality of being able to adjust does also depend on who else you might be sharing it with, if you are sharing it with other people. The challenge
Yep.
is when you are alone with this change, that
Mm.
the quality can be, very different. So here's another definition. I like this one. This one is from Patrick Rottingos. He says, the capacity to cope with and capitalize on change, and the ability to recover.
So, um, while she joins us, let me introduce, give her, she's right here. Hi, Linda, how are you?
Hi, Pooja. I'm really good. Thank you. How are you
I'm,
doing?
I'm doing good. All right. So I was just introducing you to all our viewers, but I think now that you're here, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Well, hello, everybody. I live in a small city called Clarence Rockland. It's in the province of Ontario, of course, in Canada. And I have been doing career coaching and coaching for quite a few years now. So I work primarily with women who want to get new careers, but I also have done so many different types of jobs, to be honest with you. I've worked, for example, in the mental health field as a mental health worker. Uh, and and this is related to adaptability, and I'll explain why. Because people who have mental health challenges may not always be able to adapt to situations, right? For different reasons. So when I worked in a hospital with people who have severe mental health challenges, it was because they simply, for different reasons, didn't have the ability to cope or to adapt to change. So I did work in the mental health field for many years, for 14, 15 years.
Mhm.
And I've also worked as a teacher. I worked as a college professor. I taught intro to psychology, and I taught human diversity and all sorts of different courses, more in the human services field. I really enjoyed doing that.
Wow,
Yeah.
Linda, that's actually a lot of different things that you've done, and I'm sure you've had to personally also accept a lot of changes in your life due to this. And us also, as growing individuals, we almost on a daily basis have to accept new things and maybe on a less frequent basis accept bigger changes. So I understand that it's always better to be happy in different situations. It's better to adapt to it and you know go with the situation. So
Yeah.
to create a kind of basic awareness for everybody, tell us what is adaptability and what exactly it is.
All right. Well, I do have a couple of definitions to share with you, and I'll do that in a second. You bring up a good point that, as we go through life, there are different circumstances that we're faced with. And sometimes those circumstances, whether they're by choice or imposed by us, they're not always easy to transition to, right? So we might not always be happy right away. Let's face it, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's very difficult to accept the change. And I think that when we are resisting, and when we are resistant to accepting the change, it makes our adaptability very difficult. Very,
Yeah.
very difficult. So I'm going to share a couple of definitions with you. This first one, and I'm looking at my screen right now. I won't be sharing my screen, but I'll be looking at my screen. The first one is a very generic definition. I like it, but it's very general. It says the quality of being able to adjust to new conditions. Right? So the quality of being able to adjust to new conditions. And I'd like you to think, so I am going to put you on the spot, Pooja. I'd like you to think of this definition, the quality of being able to adjust to new conditions, and when this definition has applied to a situation where you've had to adjust to new conditions. Can you think of an example?
Sure, there are a lot, but the most prominent one that comes in my head, and I think that was the first time I had to adapt to a very major change in my life, was when I left my home and went to study to a different city. So everything was different. The people around me, the place I'm staying in, my college is a new place. Everything was, the food I'm eating, each and everything was different. So yeah, that was actually a big a change in my life.
Right. And so when we talk about the quality of being able to adjust, I'm going to ask you more specific questions. Talk about the quality of you being able to adjust. Was it easy for you? Was it challenging? Did you resist? Were you open-minded? How did you adjust to this?
It sure was challenging, but I think it was fun because everybody around me was doing the same thing. Everyone was in a new situation, in a new environment.
Right.
And it's just a lot more fun when you're doing it with somebody. It was not me alone, and everybody was. So it was, I felt like I belonged to the new place.
Yeah, and I think that helps. I really do think that the quality of being able to adjust does also depend on who else you might be sharing it with, if you are sharing it with other people. The challenge is when you are alone with this change, that the quality can be, very different. So here's another definition. I like this one. This one is from Patrick Rottingos. He says, the capacity to cope with and capitalize on change, and the ability to recover when unforeseen events alter life plans. So the ability to cope and capitalize on change. This is the part that I want to emphasize. So to capitalize on change. Has there been a situation in your life that there was change and you capitalized on that? You took advantage of that change in order to adapt?
Sure. I'm not getting any instances, like all of a sudden, but I'm sure there must have been situations like that where I would have been able to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah. I'll give you an example.
For example, the most recent change that has happened, I think, in everybody's life is the change that we are not going out, we're staying at home. And, initially, maybe for a couple of days or weeks or whatever, everyone has a different time to accept. But it was pretty quick for me, and I thought that, okay, now that I'm confined to my house, there's a lot that I can do which I haven't done, and I've always wanted to do. So I quickly started doing things that, and I never got bored. So I'm actually impressed by the way I could just switch to a different situation so quickly.
That's right. So you were able to cope and capitalize on this change, and of course to recover from these unforeseen circumstances. So this definition applies to you beautifully, as you can see. And I'm sure that everybody in the audience, who are viewers, have had to go through a change and have had to accept that change in order to capitalize on it. And one of the ways we need to really determine is what is within my control here, right? And I think the quicker we accept what can we do about this, not what can't I do about it, but the quicker we can accept, okay, what can I do about this? What is within my control? The quicker we can do that, the quicker we can adapt to this change.
Yeah, I think that mindset is very important where we think about what I can do versus what I cannot do.
Absolutely.
The sooner we start thinking about what I can do, the sooner we can adapt, I feel.
Yeah.
So at this point, Sorry, I just interrupt you. I'd like for all the audience to also comment on one situation, in brief, where they've had to, they faced a major change and they've had to adapt in their lives. So I'd like to read from the audience as well.
That's
I'm sure you'd
perfect.
like to read this. Yes.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. And actually, I was going to ask the audience for their input, so it's perfect timing. Perfect
Great.
timing.
Yeah. So, Linda, like you said that as the lesser our resistance is to a new situation, the faster we can adapt. Some people have lesser resistance, some people have more resistance. So, what is it about a person that makes them have more or less resistance? Is there a particular skill that they have, or that can help?
Yeah, well, I'll talk a little bit first about what makes it that a person has less that less ability. And this is just my personal opinion. I think that it depends on our personal experience, our upbringing, our environment. Think about it. If our parents, for example, or our
Mm-hmm.
work environment, whatever environment, if that discourages us from being ourselves, from being creative, from thinking out of the box, from doing things different, if it discourages us, then we're going to have the mindset that it's not okay to do different things, right? And to try
Yeah.
different things. So if we think we can't go beyond what we're supposed to be doing, then after a while we won't. And we
Yeah.
learn, and this might take some time, but we learn to accept what is.
Yeah.
Just accept status quo. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's okay. We have to accept what is. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we have to know that there are other ways,
Yeah.
and there are other ways of coping with it. So the first part I shared was it really does depend on the circumstances, our upbringing, our mindset, what we've been learned to think of.
Yeah.
So having said that, it doesn't mean that we can't change the way we think. We can't adapt
Hmm.
to situations, right? It doesn't mean that. I think what's important too is that a person recognizes when they're struggling.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm having difficulties adjusting to or adapting to a situation, I'm probably going to go around being upset, angry, thinking that things should be different, and not thinking that I can make a difference. So I'm accepting this and I'm upset. I'm really upset. And sometimes when we're upset, these emotions trickle down to other people, and then they start being upset. So we might know that we're not coping with things very well, that we're not adapting with things very well by how we feel inside, by the resistance that we feel, and by how other people are responding to us.
Yeah.
So that's important. So that paying attention to noticing and being open to notice when people are telling us, Pooja, you've been miserable lately. What's going on with you? For example, right?
Yeah.
And then you being receptive to hearing this feedback. You being okay with, oh, maybe I have been miserable lately, or if you don't have that openness to
Yeah.
accept feedback, for example, like in this case,
Mm-hmm.
you might continue being angry and upset, and your situation isn't going to change, and you won't be able to adapt to
Yeah.
the situation, right? So that's part of it. But I want to also add another definition, which might add other skills too. For example,
Sure.
here's what Laurie says. Laurie Lenwan defines it as the ability to be creative and flexible. in the face of new situations. So, if you are used to doing things the same way all the time, and here we go, there's a new situation, and that way of doing things all the time isn't working, you're going to notice some frustrations probably. So
Yeah.
that's where that creativity, the being
Yeah.
open to trying things differently, that being
Hmm.
flexible in our minds, in our
Yeah.
in our schedule, in our way of doing things, are
Yeah.
skills that we need to develop.
This is where the whole ability of thinking out of the box comes into a situation where we sometimes there is a change and then we try to adapt to a change and then we keep trying to adapt in just one way and then we realize that probably that's not working. So then the skill of being able to think out of the box kind of helps so that we can know another way to try adapting to a particular situation.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's part of it, but I think it does start with being aware, right?
Yes.
And noticing how we're feeling, and noticing
Yeah.
that frustration that we're experiencing, for example.
Yeah.
And noticing our thoughts that are telling us how, I don't know. Um, well, I want you to think for a second here. When you've resisted change, Pooja, when you didn't want change to happen, what was happening in here?
Uh, yeah, it was a mess. I'm sure. Yeah, it was a mess because I know that change is inevitable and I can't stop that from happening. But I want to stop that from happening. So the inability to do that is actually not a very pleasant thing to be in your mind. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And our mind will tell us, no, it'll start being critical, and it might even tell us how terrible of a person we are. It'll go into almost what I call an inner gremlin, or an inner critique voice that tells us that we're terrible. And then we actually start believing these things, and we're not open to relaxing a bit more into this change, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand that the first step towards adaptability is the awareness and the acceptance for the
Hmm.
need to adapt to a certain situation. But
Hmm.
sometimes when there's a huge change that's happening,
Hmm.
maybe we're so messed up that we don't realize that we are resisting, or we are not accepting, or we need to accept and adapt. Sometimes we're just not aware of it. Some people are, some people aren't. So is there
Hmm.
what does a person do in such a situation?
Well, I'm thinking too in this case, like especially right now with the COVID,
Mm-hmm.
there's been a lot of changes. You know, uh, and in your case, you're probably still on lockdown. I'm not on lockdown. Are you on lockdown right now?
Not really, but kind of like partially, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We're not really, but we do have to wear masks.
Of course, yeah,
So I think
same.
the fact that we need to consider the long-term effects of adapting. What are the
Yeah.
long-term benefits of changing? So,
Mm.
and I'm just going to use a very simple example by wearing a mask. It's a simple
Yeah.
example. Now, I can
Yeah.
resist it. I can say, forget it, I'm not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I don't get sick, but maybe other people around me get sick. But the attitude of not caring, then I'm going to continue not wearing a mask. And that's just a simple example, for example.
Yeah.
But if I just say, okay, I won't like it, I don't like wearing a mask, but I'm going to do it because I know in the long term, this wearing a mask will help not just me, but will help my neighbor, my family, my coworkers, will help everybody. And
Yeah.
and and the more I do it, and the more I see other people do it, like, and this is part of what's happening now, I think, is that I see other people doing it. Now, I don't have a problem putting the mask on. So I'm not resisting this. But if I was resisting this and I see other people wearing masks, then I might be more apt to wear a mask. So,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that we kind of hope other people will also change and also adapt to change and also have that right mindset to change. Because if
Yeah.
they don't, then it makes our job more difficult. Then we need to truly believe that this change that I'm going to initiate
Yeah.
is important in the long run. And maybe I need to be the first one to do it, to adapt to that change.
Yeah. That's true. But sometimes changes happen really suddenly and we go in denial. Or sometimes something changes, but then we kind of expect things to come back to
Mm-hmm.
and one. And
Mm-hmm.
then we say that, okay, this change is not temporary, so let me just wait for the change to get back to normal again.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, sometimes we need to accept that we don't know how long the change is going to go on
Well,
for, whether it will go back to normal.
that's
Um,
right. And
yeah.
bottom line, Pooja, we don't know how long a change is going to last, no matter what that change is. We
Yes.
really don't know.
Yeah.
If you change schools, you go to school, you go to another city, there's in a sense a little bit of predictability. But at the end of the day, you don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow. You
Yeah.
don't. And you have a teacher today, but maybe tomorrow your teacher will be sick and won't show up. And all of a sudden you have a new replacement. So and I think this is human nature, we get used to predictability because it's easier to, to have life
Yeah.
being predictable. But in
Yeah.
reality, every day, when you really think about it, every day is different. Every day
Yes.
when I wake up, and this is probably the mindset to take on, every day when I wake up, I know the sun will rise, but I don't really know, if how much traffic there's going to be or who I'm going to run into when I go for my walk or how I'm going to feel. There's certain amounts of that isn't
Yeah.
predictable. A lot of it isn't predictable. So
Yeah.
you're right. We have to accept the fact that change is inevitable,
Yeah.
and to some extent, we need to have some stability in our life.
Mm-hmm.
In order for us to eventually become self-actualized as an individual. So we look to have some stability, and sometimes our environment can help us have that stability, but sometimes not really. So a lot of times we need to create that stability again and to
Yeah.
redefine what that new normal is,
Yeah.
keeping in mind that, okay, it could change in another month from now. And I think, as terrible as it sounds right now, I think this is the way we need to think.
Yeah. I
what
agree.
what do you what do you think? What do you think?
I agree with you. I don't think we should keep waiting for something. Even if it's temporary, so what? There's no point in waiting, I feel.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what other people think about that too. Can we ask them what our
Sure.
viewers? Yeah, let's ask our
Sure.
viewers. What do you think
Yeah.
about what I just said, what Pooja and I just expressed, that we have to accept that change is among us, it will always be, and we have to just learn to accept that change is
Yep.
is part of our life, right?
Yep. So, everyone who's watching, do let us know in the comments what you think about the line change is inevitable and how you deal with it. Meanwhile, let's read a couple comments that came in from the previous interaction. Mitul says that he had to adapt from staying at home to going to office again, in these times. And Aradhana said that shift from college to work life was a big change for her. So,
Sure.
yeah, so it'll be nice if Mithul and Aradhana, if you could tell us how you dealt with that.
Yes, very good.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm curious. I want to know. And I'm curious to see um, a little bit about the process
Mm-hmm.
You know, at the beginning, it might have been really, really hard, but then they made some type of decisions. I'd like to know a little bit more about the process that they took to finally
Yeah.
start feeling, you know,
Yeah. Maybe a step-by-step word, in one word,
well,
which can fit in a comment. Yeah.
be-
So there's one more question that just suddenly popped up. Sometimes people don't like stability. They don't like a monotonous life. They want things to keep changing. So this is like a completely different, opposite view of adaptability. So would you say that these people are more adaptable, or do they like adaptability?
well, it's very difficult to say if they are more adaptable because, you know, every person is very unique. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
every person is very unique, but it's true that there are some people who, and I don't know anybody offhand, but there are some people who like that constant change because otherwise they get really bored really fast. And where it gets challenging for them is when there are moments of quietness. They don't know how to sit with that quietness. They always want to change. So you see how adapting is adapting to our circumstances. And so, although they may be really good with adapting to change, when there's a period of quietness, that is still a change, right?
Yeah,
When
yeah,
you look at it like that, okay, let's just look at it from that perspective. When there's nothingness, and it's like, oh my God, I'm so bored, I got to change that. That might be our natural way of wanting to change what's happening, but
hmm,
that's not always realistic, not always good. For example, what is the impact of this on family members? What is the impact of that on our work environment? It's not always good to always
yeah,
want that constant change. So we have to also learn to adapt to a quiet period, you know, being bored, for example. So
hmm,
in other words, it isn't always good to, you know, be always on the move and always be wanting to
yeah.
adapt to situations because sometimes having quiet space, quiet times might be difficult for them, but it is also part of life, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's necessary as well. Everyone needs a break. And I think these breaks just happen to come into our lives when we need them the most.
Exactly. And I really believe in that. It's so true. And okay,
Yeah.
this is a mindset. Okay, this is a mindset, and I truly believe in that. That's part of my spiritual beliefs. You know that I might say that I do believe that even these boring, kind of tedious moments are there to. They are really there for us to go. Okay, maybe I
Absolutely.
did. Yeah, maybe I did need to slow down here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just life's way of telling us to slow down, calm down, take a break.
Exactly. And this is a
Yeah.
mindset, isn't it, though, Pooja?
Yeah.
I mean, and this ability to look at it like that is part of being flexible.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think if we have that belief, that spiritual belief, then it really is
Mhm.
helpful.
It is. Yes.
It really is
So
helpful.
again, it is the fact that this change has happened in my life for a reason. So let me see what that reason is, focus on that, and instead of being resistant towards it. Yeah, I completely
Yeah.
agree.
Except I'm going to say, Pooja, that we don't always know the reason right away.
Yeah.
So we can't, I'm just reframing, we can't always focus on the reason we're changing because we might not know or we might think it's for a reason but it's really not. So it's more of accepting that that there's a reason for this change. I don't know what it is, and that's okay. And
Hmm.
I'm open to experience really what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's funny that because I've had to learn to accept this type of mindset many, many years ago. And months later, or maybe years later, I'm able to go back and think about that time and go, now I know.
Now I know. Yeah.
Now I know why I went
Yeah.
through what I went through, right? Have you ever
Yeah.
experienced that?
Yes, absolutely. I so many times I think why such a bad situation, but now that I look back, I know, and I wouldn't want it to be in any other way because that has brought me to where I am. That has taught me a lot of things, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's worth it to wait for a really long time and then find out what the change, what the reason was for something to
yeah,
change.
that's right. So I think this is part of how we can adapt as well. And
Mhm.
it is a mindset, but it's part of a belief of some sort. It's part of a spiritual belief. It's part of a spiritual principle of
Mhm.
accepting what is, and then just and I usually say letting it go to the big guy. I call God.
The big guy.
I call him the big guy. So, but
Yeah,
and we all have our own words, but
exactly.
that's who I call him, the big guy. And um, sometimes how I've had to adapt is by saying, okay, I'm not going to be able to make any changes here. The rest is really up to the big guy, and I've really said that out loud sometimes. And to be honest, sometimes I've gotten down on my knees um, to pray and say, take care of this for me, please.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we try, and then when we can't, then we leave it to. I say that time will heal. That is my when
Yeah,
I don't know what to do or what I'm doing is not working. Then I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna. I did my best. Now I'm gonna wait for the time to, sort this for me.
that's
So yeah,
right. You see, but
yeah.
that's a decision, isn't it? It's a
Yes.
decision that we've made, and you were open to
Mm-hmm.
making that decision. And I think this is another skill, is to have that openness to think, to say, all right, I'm accepting what I can do, and I'm accepting that I can't do it all, or I can't do
Mm-hmm.
nothing, and I'm
Yeah.
deciding to just kind of let it
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Yeah. Mitul says, tough due to change in routine, but have to accept the new normal and make ourselves more flexible. About him having to start going to office again, this is how he accepted it. So I
Yeah,
think it makes complete sense that you have to accept. Maybe, normal is a different thing now. The definition of normal has changed. So acceptance. Yeah.
that's right.
Like,
And sometimes, like in this case, this was a change that was imposed on us.
yeah.
And sometimes when it's imposed on us, it's either going to be very easy or not easy at all, because we resist that power of it being
Yeah.
imposed on us. But, at the end of the day, and I'm glad that he's mentioned that he's had to accept
Hmm. Yeah.
that this was an imposed change. We now have to work from home. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So, acceptance, faith, these are two skills that I pick are necessary to adapt. So, are there more skills that we can,
Yeah.
develop
Yeah.
ourselves
I'm
in?
gonna I'm gonna add here, being willing to learn,
Yeah, that's important. Very important.
having having that openness to learn other options. If I think I know it all and I think I know everything, and at my age, I don't know everything. Okay, but there are some people that think that at my age, they know everything. They've worked here, they've worked there, they've got all sorts of degrees, and they think they know it all. And I think
Yeah,
this could get us into trouble, thinking and maybe knowing that we know it all, because we don't. We
we
don't.
do. We
You
never
know,
do. Yeah,
we
yeah,
won't.
yeah.
So
That's
I
true.
need to, and working from home, I know a lot of people had difficulties with that, because and I used to go to an office too. A couple of years ago, I used to go to work, but now I work from home. So if I wasn't open to learning the new technology, if I wasn't open to learn new skills, then
Mm.
I would get so frustrated that I could get sick with that frustration.
Yeah,
So that's why that awareness and that noticing how we're feeling, and
yeah,
being open to learn. Okay, I'm open to learn, and not open to learn with love. Let's add that. Because if I open to learn with resistance, then something is not going to work properly in my mind. It's not
Yeah.
going to soak in, and I'm not going to learn what I want to learn or what I need
Yeah.
to learn. So
Yeah.
opening to learn with, and I know that you practice the loving kind meditation, right? Loving kindness, compassion meditation. So I'm kind of coming in from that angle that when you're opening to learn with love and not with fear,
Mm-hmm.
right? When we're afraid to learn new things, we resist it. But when we're opening to love, opening to learn with love, then
Yeah.
it kind of creates that openness.
Yeah. That's actually a very powerful insight for me, because sometimes when I'm happy to accept change,
Mm-hmm.
though sometimes when I know that some change is going to happen in my life, I get nervous. But when it does happen, I'm happy. But sometimes it makes me have to do things which I really am not interested in. For example,
Yeah,
I don't like staying at home, and and it's been easier than I thought. It's been really a lot easier than I thought, and I don't know why. But sometimes we have to do things we don't like, and that's probably the best way to adapt to a particular change. So yeah, being willing to learn with love will kind of negate that not liking to do something for. Yeah.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. I really do believe that because if you take a look at doing things out of fear
Mm.
or adapting because we're afraid of what's happening right now, for example, we resist every little thing as a result of that. But if we are open to learn and open to accept change with love, there's more of a gratitude. There's more of an appreciation
Yeah.
for the change that's happening, for
Yeah.
whatever change
Yeah.
is happening, and that
Yeah.
that makes our adapting a lot easier that way too,
That's
right?
true. Yeah, and when we're open like that, we will also realize that every change is a way for us to grow as a person. We always learn, we always grow. So, yeah, I agree.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about that. You know, I truly believe that when there's a crisis in our life, that it is an opportunity to grow. And
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that that's the only time that we have a growth spurt is when there's that crisis, and however we define crisis, because we can all define it in a different way, but we all experience it differently. But oftentimes when we've gone through a crisis situation, like this can be considered a crisis, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
That it is an opportunity to learn. And if we think back of, see us, we started in March. When did you start the big change?
End of March.
March, okay.
Third week of March, yeah.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced at the same time. So when you think back of the growth that you've done personally and maybe even professionally since
Yes.
March, you could probably start naming all sorts of things that you've learned, right?
Yeah. Well, I've done things I never thought I'd do. So, and it's nice, to be surprised by myself. It's really nice. It's a new
Yeah.
side of myself that I found.
See, that's
It's,
wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And
I
that
think it all comes
openness,
with the acceptance and openness. Yes.
I know. And maybe we could say those are the base, the base,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
from there, the opportunities and the possibilities exist, right?
Yeah. Would you also say that being open to all this helps us be prepared all the time for something to change? For example, even at this moment, am I prepared if things change completely for me tomorrow? Is there something that we can do, or an attitude that we can have, that we're always prepared for something to change in like a major way?
I think the best way is to look at this as when I was talking about love and fear.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think our natural, and this is just my personal opinion from going through different experiences, I think our default way of thinking is I'm afraid. I think that's our natural way of thinking. I'm afraid because I don't like change, so I'm afraid of change. Okay. And then it's, well, I can either be afraid of this change and still love this change. I can be afraid of what's happening and still love this fear because I really
Mm-hmm.
think, and this is all, I mean, we can do this through meditation, right? We might be able to do this through journaling as well.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
it's when we turn it with we turn the angle just a little bit and look at fear, but with love, through love's eyes,
Yeah.
that we're able to accept it more and continue to go through it.
Yeah.
So
Wow. That's actually a very unique perspective to
I
look at. Yeah.
yeah, I think this is what I've learned, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. Is because I used to stop myself from doing things. And I know this is not really talking about adaptability, but it's how I'm using this fear love thing. I used to stop myself from doing things because I was afraid,
Mm-hmm.
and then I started learning about love and the power of love, and I started thinking about how can I bring love
Yeah.
into this situation here. I'm still afraid, because I'm nervous. Maybe I'm nervous and I'm not sure what's going to happen tomorrow but at least if I love myself through this change, and I mean, and this is the only thing that I can do,
Yeah.
especially if
Yeah.
I don't, and I can actually feel love, when we practice meditation, that loving kindness, compassion meditation, we feel it, right?
Yeah.
We really do.
Absolutely. Yes, we do.
So
That's true.
I think that's how I've learned it. So since since accepting that, I've kind of used this way of thinking fear versus love in different ways, and I think with adaptability, it fits perfectly with that too.
It does. It does. That's a really new insight that I've got today. There's another curiosity that I have. So, a lot of times we deal with changes by ourselves, but we're not always alone, right? We have people around us. Sometimes it's people around us who are dealing with major changes.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's us. So sometimes the people we are with, they're not very supportive when we are going through a transition.
yeah.
So how do we deal with that, and how do we be better people around those who are dealing with changes in their lives?
Yeah, this can be very, very, very challenging depending on how negative or toxic this environment can be. So, short of leaving that environment, if it's possible, but it's not always possible.
Mm.
So, if it's possible, I always think that it's better to leave that environment if it's a
Right.
toxic environment, whether it's work or home, if you know that it's hurting you,
Mm-hmm.
then if you can leave, then
Yeah.
I think then it's a decision. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's not possible to leave.
Yeah.
So I think here a couple of things that I would personally do. I probably would. I wouldn't argue with people, okay, because I know that that's not going to get me anywhere. To
Absolutely.
be
Yeah.
honest,
Yeah.
to be honest,
Yeah.
that's not going to help. The only thing that I could see doing for myself would be I would probably meditate more, to be honest with you, if that was my situation. I would
Mm-hmm.
meditate more, and I don't mean meditating all day. I mean,
Yeah.
because I meditate now for 30 minutes, sometimes twice a day, 30 minutes. So I might do that. I might do maybe more of that. And
Mm-hmm.
I would probably do more journaling, to be honest with you. I'd probably do a lot more journaling. Now, I probably would do a couple of journals. One would be to get my frustrations out, because I'm sure
Yeah.
that I would be
Yeah.
frustrated,
Went
and
out.
let's be real, let's be honest, and I don't want to be frustrated or express my frustrations in a negative way to whoever I'm with. So that wouldn't be good. That wouldn't be good for me, and it wouldn't be good for them either. So I probably would want a journal, and at some point I might want to assert myself and talk about it. But again, it would depend on who is actually there. If they're open
Yeah.
to talking, great. But if they're not, then I might have to make a decision to maybe talk to somebody else about it,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so that I could start feeling better.
Yeah.
And because if depending on who they are, they may not be open to
Yeah.
hearing me.
That's true. Yeah.
They may not be.
So a positive environment is really necessary when we are going through change. How can we ensure that we create a positive environment for people around us?
Yeah, by being positive, right? We have to start. Well,
Yeah.
we have to start with that mindset, and that's
Mhm.
what I was going to end with, that when I am positive, if I've done my meditation, if I've done my journaling, I'm going to feel better, because I
Mhm.
mentioned that I will do a journal just to get stuff out, but then I will also do a journal, whether it's a gratitude journal or whether it's a how can I turn this situation around journal. But at
Yeah.
the end, these two practices for me will at least make me feel better, so
Mhm.
that when I go out into that environment, I'm already feeling and maybe projecting happiness and joy and positivity,
Yeah.
which um, if I continue doing this, now they're not going to change right away, because we know we can't change people.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm going to have an influence on them, but not right away, and maybe
Yeah.
not ever, and maybe not ever, right?
Mhm.
So at the very least, I need to continue taking care of myself. And if I notice a slight shift in them,
Mhm.
I'm going to, and this comes with, I don't know if you know about positive reinforcements. When children do something right, we want to reinforce them. We want to
Yeah.
say, good job, or wow, what a great day it is today. So it's that same kind of using those psychology principles, that when we
Mhm.
notice a slight change in a thought, like from the other person's perspective, I'm talking about, when we notice
Yeah.
a slight shift in their mood, that we
Mhm.
really appreciate that. Wow, I really
Yeah.
appreciate your good mood today. So that we reinforce whatever slight change we see, and we start showing how grateful we are for things that
Yeah.
they're doing, like silly, and it could be just silly things like tidying the kitchen counter.
Yeah.
Now I'm noticing that they're tidying the kitchen counter, and I should notice that, and I should
Yeah.
thank them for that,
Yeah.
so that this thank you for
Yeah.
cleaning the dishes,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
any slight shift that I notice in them
Mhm.
as a result of me being, you know, pleasant,
Okay. Yeah.
and I'm not talking about being happy like woohoo, you know, I'm not talking about
Yeah. Just being warm
exaggerating.
around them. Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Mhm.
So I think that will be helpful to help
Yeah.
shift the environment that we live in.
Yeah. Sometimes a kind word or just like a word of appreciation or acknowledgement does, it has a huge impact on people.
It does.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's
Yeah.
huge. I mean, and we notice it with children. I'm sure you notice it with the work that you do,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yes,
And
totally.
they love, children love, and adults love being appreciated.
Yeah.
And that showing appreciation and telling them validates that, you know, They
They're on the
are
right path.
exactly. And I think this helps people to adapt to be okay with what's
Yeah.
going on, you know?
Yes. Yes. Even the thought is just very pleasant, so I'm sure it feels good as well. We have a couple comments from Vishal says leaders that can adapt to change are motivated, not easily discouraged, and are usually more creative than a normal team member. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. Absolutely. And I have to agree with Michelle. Um, a leader can either be um, one that inspires his team or one that does the opposite. And we all know it can happen if, you know, if it's a toxic, if the leader is has the mindset that nothing's going to change in this work environment. What can happen? But when
Yeah.
a leader has that mindset that we can make a difference, we will, you know, accomplish what we want to accomplish, that will empower
Yeah.
the staff to
It's a
think
ripple
this.
effect.
Absolutely. And it's so important that it starts with one person and then it will trickle down to everybody else eventually,
Yeah.
right? It will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I've heard more and more recently about how leaders are practicing mindfulness and bringing it to the work environment. And I know that, you know, you've completed a program recently on that, but so more and more leaders are bringing mindfulness to the work environment,
Mm-hmm.
and incorporating that during the day as well, and being open to people to practice mindfulness meditation, for example, and not just meditation, but being mindful in the moment, even during meetings and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
talking about
Yeah.
real things, you know what I mean? Like, so this is something that's been happening over the last few years, and I think it's really beneficial, and I think that is the way of our future, in a sense, you know, to have
Yeah.
more and more leaders like Vishal, for sure.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you absolutely. And we have another comment, but before that, I would like to just bring to your notice that we might, the session might end soon because we're reaching an hour. So I would like to give the viewers an opportunity to ask more questions. I think this will be the last chance. So if you could start putting in questions which Linda can answer. And the comment from Shiva Artist 16 is, but ma'am, sometimes it's very difficult to find someone with whom we can share our feelings because not
Yes,
everyone understands you. They are mostly judgmental.
I
When
know.
we were talking about sometimes we have a negative environment when we're going through. So, what would be
Well,
the
yeah.
ideal thing to do in this situation?
So there's a couple of things that I'm going to suggest. Is number one, that's true, and sometimes we don't have any control over our environment, and sometimes we can't leave. But I suggest to be your own best friend. To start with that, that's so important. You know, we have different voices in our mind, in our head, and I think one of those voices can be our best friend voice, and our best friend voice would say, you can do this, we've got this, I love you, right? Uh, so that's so important, and I know it sounds silly, but I think
It
it's
does.
crucial. You know, it sounds like, oh yeah, you want me to, it's so important to be our own best friend. And the other
Yes.
thing too is online, there are a lot of groups out there. You know, there are a lot of different groups, and I'm sure on Instagram, and I don't know Instagram that much. I mentioned that to you, Pooja, but I'm sure there are a lot of groups available on Instagram that is um,
Yes.
positive, that is positive, you know.
Yeah, there
and
certainly are. Yeah.
and if there isn't, create one, you know what I mean? Like, if there isn't
Yeah.
a group, you create one. You know,
Yeah.
I know on Facebook there are so many groups now that are positive focused. It's all about being grateful and positive minded. There's a lot.
Yeah.
So it's out there, but if you don't find one in your own circle, then create it.
Make
Create it.
one. Yeah. It's as simple as that, actually. And you
Yeah.
were talking about these voices. One of those voices is going to be our best friend. I think meditation helps us listen to these voices, communicate with these voices, and like you said, meditation and journaling as well. Shiva
Yeah.
says thank you, and Vishal has another question. He asks, is adaptability the new competitive advantage?
I think so. I I think this is the reality. This is it, right? We have to be adaptable, and um, at work,
Yeah,
when you're applying for work, an
yeah,
employer might ask you what are your strengths. As you know, I'm a career coach, and employers always ask what are your strengths, what are you really good at, and I think
yeah,
if you didn't say I'm very adaptable before, start saying it, especially if it is one of your strengths, because in the workplace, just like any other type of environment,
yeah,
we do have to be adaptable, and an employer will appreciate you,
yeah,
not more than other people, but will appreciate you because you are also adaptable
yeah. Yeah.
and you have
It
that
gives
mindset.
us it gives us a lot more opportunities, access that when someone knows that this person is adaptable, they provide the person with a lot more opportunities as well. This is something that I've personally faced in my work as well.
Yeah, it's a transferable skill. As career coaches, we use the word transferable skill. It is. It's absolutely transferable to one work environment to the next work environment.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, Linda, I think we have 3 minutes or maybe a little more. So, if we have any questions, we'll take. But are there any finishing words, to conclude from your side?
Well, I think I've shared enough, but I just want to say that it's a work in progress, right?
Yeah,
Adaptability is a work in progress. I don't think we ever get perfect at it, because any situation that we encounter, any new situation that we encounter, is an opportunity to practice being adaptable. And
absolutely.
sometimes we are learning new techniques, new skills, or
Mhm.
reminded of techniques and skills and practices that we need to incorporate.
Yeah,
And so they are, every day we're presented with opportunities to practice and learn new ways of
yeah,
adapting.
that's very
So,
true. Does it
so
sometimes
that's that.
help to strengthen our ability to adapt? We create changes for ourselves so that we can adapt to it.
That's right. And I think if you look back at the last year, and you mentioned that you've already done some changes, but even in the last year, in the last couple of years, and last few years, how adaptability has been beneficial to you. You
Yeah,
could probably, it's probably been more beneficial to you than not.
yeah, absolutely.
So there are
It's something that
advantages.
yeah, deeply needs reflection. Vishal says, thanks, Linda, and I agree with him. You adapted to Instagram Live well. We shall stay connected. Yeah, this is your first Instagram Live, and I think it went really, really well.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
my first live on Instagram.
It was really nice to talk to you, Linda, and it was amazing to hear your insights. Personally, I have so many valuable things that I'm going to take back from the conversation with you, and I'm sure everyone else also does. Thank you so much for
Oh,
agreeing to
you're
do this
welcome.
with us,
You're
and we're
welcome.
glad that you're here, and we'll stay connected for sure.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much, Pooja. And goodbye, everybody. See you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everyone.
Bye
Have a
bye.
nice day, Linda. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, thank you everyone for joining in. I hope this session has been insightful for you. Do let us know what your thoughts are in the comments below, and have a great week ahead. Bye bye.